is our online learning for this year. So tonight we've got Mr. Bob Reed, Ms. Tammy Tomash here tonight as well, and then also have one of our teacher leaders, Sam Dykes, will be joining us on a recorded version tonight too, so which fits in well with all things virtual. So I'm excited to have overview of what's been happening this year. It's come a long, long way since those first days in mid-August and mid-September. So we're excited to kind of hear how things have gone and kind of where things are going the rest of the year. So with that, hand it over to Mr. Reed to get things going.
Thank you, Shannon, and thanks for having us here tonight to present a little bit on our Family Choice online model. Just to begin with, like Shannon had mentioned in his introductory comments, thinking about the 31 staff members that were assigned, I think the third week in August, and then we started school on September 14th after 9 days of professional learning. I know all our teachers throughout the district are working very, very hard and mitigating very, very difficult circumstances, but these 31 individuals, I would start a school with them anytime. Just because their work ethic and the amount of positive energy and the way that they were able to persevere through this. At the start, it was really stressful, I would say, on all 31 of the staff members. I think we've come a long way since September with that. Not that all stress is ever lifted off any teacher, but I think we're in a much better spot than where we were in September with some of the additions and some of the professional learning that we had. The instructional challenge was moving to a completely online model. None of the 31 staff had ever done this before. Well, no one in our district had ever done hybrid, face-to-face, changing back and forth, or distance learning, and they really adapted to it over time. If you remember, we started with that Grant Wood AEA Continuous Learning Field Guide. We used that for professional development, just as far as best practices and what we could expect the teaching and learning process to be like at the start of it. Not to sugarcoat anything, the first 2 weeks we had a lot of technical difficulties, whether it was from derecho, whether it was device issues, whether it was hotspot issues, or even just learning the Schoology LMS. That was new to our virtual staff as well as to all teachers here, but it's a little bit different flavor when you're using that to communicate assignments virtually and you don't have the students right there in the room with you. So the staff has come a long way. It was, like I had mentioned, somewhat overwhelming at the beginning. But I'll let some other people talk about that a little bit in the presentation. Tammy will talk about it when she's here at the lectern, and then Sam will talk about it through her video also. I know that without the support of our teacher leadership system also, that was an integral part of getting us up and running and still providing us support today with curriculum content, different tech modalities, and things that we're going to do. And again, Sam will talk a little bit more about the professional learning opportunities. When we started, we had a focus on literacy and mathematics, and that still remains our targeted focus with the limited time that we have as far as our synchronous instruction. We have been pushing out social studies and science content that students can access synchronously and asynchronously, dependent on the grade level. So we're providing each step of the way. I think the continuous improvement cycle, we've gotten better at some things. We've also provided some counseling links for our students. I know it's not a daily, weekly, like a normal rotation counseling service, but the counselors have emailed links out to students that they could Zoom in for lunch or know that there are counselors out there if there's support that is also needed. We still are doing an asynchronous model for our specials or our essentials. And when we started, the first asynchronous tool that we really had was Lexia Learning, which all the on-site people have, which is more of a reading thing for students that they could access on their own. So I think step by step, day by day, we've gotten better. We still have a long ways to go, and we'll get there. Every week, we always preach continual improvement and trying to make things better for not only our teaching and our engagement, but the students on the other end that are receiving those services. So when we first started, our enrollment in September 2020 was 1,050 students. These are our current enrollment numbers as of when I made this PowerPoint. Just as a reminder, at our 5th and 6th grade level, those are 3-person teams there. The students aren't all equally divided within the 3, but our intermediate numbers are a little bit larger than some of the numbers that we would see in the PK4 level. We do have some larger 2nd grade classes yet, and a large kindergarten at one building also, but this is the way that our current numbers stand. And that's after 2 transitions back to on-site learning, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We had one, of course, at the start of the second quarter, and we also had another one at the start of the third quarter. As far as our programming is concerned, we do use a cohort model. Students would have an AM or a PM cohort. And thinking about our online learning also and where we're at, prior to this year, I had finished going in my role as Director of Innovation. I had gone to every PTO meeting at the elementary level, and we had talked about our 3-year one-to-one plan. Well, I know, I'm glad there's a little laughter about that. Here we are, we did it all in 1 year. And putting a different lens on this, not only on our Family Choice Online, but for all students in the hybrid or whatever modality that they learned in, these are some valuable things that I want to take back and not lose momentum with next year, whether it's on-site or in an online model. So as we continued, I talked a little bit about Schoology as our LMS. That's also been supported with some other programming that can be integrated within it, like Pear Deck, or a lot of our lower elementary teachers use Seesaw. And it was just a lot of getting used to the organization of how I want to organize my courses and what's the best way for students to access those courses. A little of that was problematic just because we roster kids through PowerSchool, and PowerSchool, a student can only belong in one building. So we had to create some virtual enrollments also so that, number one, they're still rooted in their building, but number two, that when we are within the LMS, parents, students, and teachers can access the proper students and get that information pushed out to those things. One of the things that we added this year, just for our online students, was ST Math, and that's a very conceptually based mathematics program. There's very little or no verbiage in it. Students solve puzzles, and they move through things in a conceptual fashion, and the feedback that I've received, I think a lot of the students like the puzzle aspect, and they're persevering in those things. As we moved to this last rotation, or this last rotation for kids to move back on site, one of our cohorts really shrank down to where we could combine it into one, not have an AM or a PM. The teacher that this happened to happened to be a reading support teacher, so we reallocated her day that she's going to be providing reading support for some of our virtual students, especially at the intermediate level where we have a lot of those. So we maximized that resource. We thought, boy, we could really use you, and you could go back to doing some of the things that you were trained to do with this. So that's actually started, that will start for some of our intermediate students on Wednesday. And then we have a couple other hotspot areas that we need to address also, and we're going to take those once we get those kids up and running for the continuing semester, basically. So when we started, we didn't have a reading support option, but now we do, just based on how we're utilizing our resources. And a lot of the things, too, that we're doing in an online fashion mirror what's happening on the building. And that's true of our standardized assessments, too. All our virtual kids did the 2 fast windows, whether it was fall and winter. We supplied letters to parents indicating how their progress was going on those. We'll continue that. In the fall, we offered NWA testing, and that's specifically for grade 5 and grade 6, and we'll follow up with that again in the spring, also in May. So those standardized testing things will continue. And also just thinking about the in-house screeners that we use for identification. Next week, we'll be screening 3rd graders with the COGAT screener for identification for our LEO program. Later in the spring, we'll be giving 5th grade students the pre-algebra assessment also, in case they want to take a pre-algebra course as a 6th grader. So we're mirroring what's happening and providing those same opportunities for programming as what the building level does. One of the things coming up too is the ISASP, and that will be given to our virtual students also. Nathan and I are thinking about ways to work through the logistics of that to ensure that, number one, we can meet the criteria of 95% of our students being tested, and number two, for the families that are on, that have chose Family Choice, that they feel a safe, comfortable environment if we have to bring them on site and possibly test them. So we're working through the logistics of that also. One of the things that we had was the transition to on-site. Second quarter was very interesting, to say the least. We had opened up our window like mid-October or the second week of October, and at that time the positivity rates were relatively low. By the time the window closed, our rates had shot up tremendously. So we had a lot of families say, we wanted to go because the rate was here, is there any way we could say online? And we allowed that to happen just because of the fluctuating rates at that time. Third quarter, as we transition at the start of this month, we provided a shorter window. Just we thought parents would be able to make a better informed decision rather than having a long window where things might change. And we did extend it to include the board meeting date, although that was more for the middle and high school. But still, a lot of families have more than one child, and we wanted to make sure that we coordinated around those things. Fourth quarter will begin April 8th and goes to June 10th. We've already started collaboration around how we want to handle this last transition opportunity for our students and our staff. From just more of a principal role, providing professional development to our staff, we are using the same text methods, whatever, that are found on our on-site. We're looking at the new art of science and teaching, focusing on the Marzano elements for our professional growth goals. This year, with our Family Choice online staff, they all chose by grade level to focus on some student engagement elements. How can I engage kids through academic games? How can I engage them through numerous ways? And so that's the data that we're looking at and the professional learning that we're providing for our staff around those elements. One of the things that we did look at too is thinking about our day-to-day. We do have the standardized, our FAST scores, and just like our elementary buildings and intermediates do, we brought Grant Wood staff in, we went through each grade level, we looked at our FAST scores and started to think, well, these are our kids that are really in need, are interventions working, how can we change that, how can we maximize the time with those things, with our students, so that we can move them off par or move their growth trajectory to where it needs to be. And so all that student growth, that still continues. It's just not one day, but we deemed it a day-to-day. That work still continues in their weekly PLC meetings also. They're always looking at students, they're planning around student data, the actions around that they're planning instruction also. The one thing that we're not focusing on, that is the same as the on-site, is the HRS work, the high reliability schools, because we're only going to be in existence till the end of the school year as the model that we know it. But all the work that we've done as far as with the Marzano elements or the engagement strategies or the professional growth will fit right back into the buildings when those teachers return to their on-site teaching location. I've kind of just rambled on a lot right now, and that's not what I like to do, is just talk at people. I'll let Samantha Dykes share her experience as, well, let me back up a little bit. Prior to our quarantine last fall, or last spring, Samantha was hired as a technology integration coach. Her role has expanded greatly within the family online choice model, not only as tech integration, but also as instructional coach, and then she still supports 2 on-site buildings also. So she has been doing just a ton of fabulous work, and I'll let her just talk a little bit about her story.
Hello, I am Samantha Dykes, and I am the instructional and technology coach for Early Childhood Blended Program through 6th grade online learning. I am also the technology coach for Boulder Peak and Lynn Grove. So last year at this time, I just found out I was hired as a technology coach, and I was so excited about the opportunity. Little did I know what this year would bring, but I've always thought in the biggest challenges come the biggest growth. And I definitely feel like I have grown as not only a technology coach this year, but also as an instructional coach as well. So we started the year with 29 teachers. We have 1 on maternity leave right now, and we are the 2nd biggest building in the district. I say building very loosely because our teachers are spread across the district, and some of our teachers were librarians last year, reading teachers, special education teachers, and classroom teachers. So we have a very diverse teaching staff this year, which brought a lot of new learning, and that started with technology. So technology is just a tool in terms of getting the kids working together and motivating them. The teacher is the most important. And that is something I want to talk about, is how important these teachers are. But technology this year has also been our lifeline for learning. So we have had to utilize technology in a brand new way that we have not seen before, especially in the lower elementary world, where we are solely relying on technology to be that platform for students to learn. So the teachers have gone above and beyond to make this work and to provide quality education for all students in a virtual environment. Professional learning this year, we had 9 days before students began in the classroom. We went through Grant Wood AA's continuous learning field guide with some of the Grant Wood staff, which talked through how to virtually teach. We have paired with all of the coaches on site to help foster PLCs in this new virtual world. We have talked about standards-based grading for some of our teachers. This is their first year doing report cards, so making sure we have a great understanding of what standards-based grading is. Using PowerTeacher Pro for report cards and for assignments. Schoology is our learning management system, which is new to the entire district, so we had training on that. Seesaw was new for many of our teachers as well, so we provided a session on Seesaw and also coaches on site paired with our teachers as well to get them ready to go. And then we created the at-home learning virtual learning guide, which was a great resource for even on-site teachers when we have dabbled in that virtual learning world as well. Zoom was a new experience for many of us, so really getting those settings and how to utilize Zoom. When you are virtually teaching, there is so many different things that you have to think about. You're no longer just standing in front of your class, but you're clicking here and clicking there and making sure your stuff is all on one screen and working. So it's just been a whole learning process with the technology piece. And then we have offered district TQSA classes. So with that, I have had the opportunity to teach as well. And I just want to give a huge kudos to the teachers. So the mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, and the great teacher inspires. And I cannot tell you, now I'm getting kind of emotional here, but I am so inspired by what these teachers do every single day. Unless you've planned a virtual lesson or a virtual day, it takes so much work and effort to put in. And now you are also planning breakout rooms and just every piece of technology that goes along with it. You can't just change what you're going to do that day or try a new worksheet or a new book because everything needs to be so thoughtful and planned out. So the teachers have really gone above and beyond to make this a quality education for all students. So this year has opened many doors to the future of education. This year we were forced to move into something that was new and has not been done at Linn-Mar, but it's exciting to think that next year is a new opportunity and that education won't be the same and no longer will be forced into a situation, but now we can really excel at what comes next. So we have the opportunity to move forward and find ways to continue to inspire learning, unlock potential, and empower achievement, no matter who you are or what your learning platform might be. So we are in a very exciting time at Linn-Mar, and I am so grateful to be a part of it.
And now I'll turn it over to Tammy to talk about her experience as a virtual kindergarten teacher.
Thanks, Bob. My name's Tammy Tomash, and like you said, I am teaching kindergarten virtual. And honestly, I hadn't taught kindergarten since I student taught, and that was a really long time ago. So it's been a very interesting year and a really fun year. As I reflected on my journey, it was really kind of fun. And when Bob asked me to do it, I didn't really know what I was, thinking about. And I said, "Oh, sure, no problem." But it was really fun to kind of sit back and think about this whole journey since August. And that is the first day of school. But it was late August when, I won't forget it, I was sitting on the couch and my cell phone rang, and it was Mrs. Kretschmar telling me that I was going to be teaching virtual kindergarten. And I could tell she was nervous to tell me that, but I'm like, it's fine, I'll do it. It'll be fine, I'll work through this. I was up for the challenge, but as soon as I hung up the phone, I was online. I was Googling anything I could about virtual. And I saw some teachers that, no, I didn't want to model what they were doing, and I saw a couple like, oh, that's some cute ideas and stuff for kindergarten virtually, but I also had to learn curriculum and learn more about the standards. And really at that time, there wasn't much online about virtual kindergarten because it was new kind of across the United States. Anyway, so then school started and we had 9 days of in-service, like you've heard, I think, 2 times already, but all the virtual teachers and classroom teachers were working all the time. We were learning nonstop and learning nonstop. I remember being in here one day and like just total brain overload. Okay, we've got so much to learn, but honestly, we were working 12 to 14 hours every day, including weekends, and that probably didn't stop till a couple months in, maybe 3 for me, but it's gotten better, so that's good. Anyway, we had support, but things were new to everybody, so we were all learning, and we had to spend time, on our own trying to figure things out too. Just there wasn't enough Sam and Carla Coonans to go around to help everybody learn everything. But we did have that training day with Grant Wood, so that helped us kind of see what things look like, and we had time to collaborate, and we had time to plan with our teams, which was essential because Tara Morey's on my team, and she's a kindergarten teacher, so it was nice to have someone on our team that was a kindergarten teacher. We learned about Zoom. We learned more about Seesaw, Schoology, Clever, Google, how to create Google slides and how to create Google choice boards, and then how to put those Google choice boards into Schoology. And then also at that time, we were learning to how are we going to help our virtual families. So we also had to do that. We were the experts to them about how do you do this whole platform of virtual learning. And I was also learning about the Super Kids reading program. A week before Kelly called me about kindergarten, I was out of training for 2nd grade Super Kids. So I had to flop right away to kindergarten. And so I was learning that. And we were also calling all of our families and touching base for them for the first time. So it was a crazy, busy time. I was fortunate that my kids are grown and gone. I had plenty of time to dedicate to this. So that's been a plus for me. So speaking of those grown kids, the weekend before school started, I thought, you better be smooth on this or you're never going to hold a 5-year-old's attention on a Zoom call. So I called my daughter at college at UNI and I said, some of your roommates are education majors. Would they want to be kindergarten students for me and we can Zoom together? And she's like, sure. So they got on Zoom with me, and I fumbled and I failed and I fumbled and I failed, and we tried like 6 times and I like hung up and was like, I'll just call you guys back, we'll try this later, I can't do it. And I just kept practicing because you are, like Sam said, you're moving the camera and you've got and there's just so many parts to the puzzle when you're teaching on Zoom. And they laughed at me and I, kind of laughed at myself, but I also thought, I don't think I can do this. And after a few tries, 6 that day, I could do it. I became an expert at it, and I was like, wow, I really got this. And so that felt really, really, really good. Then the first day rolled around, and I woke up. I think I texted you first thing in the morning. He did share his cell phone with all of us so we could reach out to Bob anytime, day or night, so that was really nice. But my families did not have the Zoom app on their iPads. And I remember laying in bed going, oh my gosh, they don't have Zoom. And so our wonderful technology department worked really hard, and everybody had Zoom by the time school started that morning. But it was a scramble, and I was like really nervous. Here I thought, oh, I got this already. But then they all had Zoom, and that's me reading first day jitters. I probably had major first day jitters, but Mrs. Coonan, Carla, came in my room and snapped that picture and kind of sat there and watched me for a little bit. And I thought, oh gosh, don't watch me on the first day. But anyway, it went really well. And then that night, several people said, there's a Facebook post about you. You should read it. And Sam actually sent it to me. And so this is censored, not the student's name, but it says, okay, I'm impressed. My child's kindergarten teacher and how she is educating them on how to use their iPads and Zoom right off the jump. So smooth and smart, I was completely ready for a mess, but wow, so impressed. So that felt really good to get that. But I will say this year is I think my 32nd year teaching, and I have got the kindest feedback from parents that I've ever gotten. and more feedback from parents that I've ever gotten. And I don't know if it's because they're sitting there and they realize, oh, wow, teachers do a lot more than I expected. I don't know if it's that or what, but my parents, the support that they have given me is just incredible, and I appreciate that so much. Whenever they write me an email about something, they always say something really kind first, and that has felt really good, and I think having them help lift me up has also made me want to work harder too, just to make this work. So I appreciate that. Also this year, shortly after that first day, I think it was about 14 teachers throughout the district, thanks to Sam, putting my name out there, said, oh, if you need to learn how to do this, just go watch Tammy. So pretty soon I had teachers sitting behind me, I had teachers on Zoom, and I think I counted 14 from around the district. They came to my classroom on Zoom, and honestly, I felt really good that they could watch me and learn how to do this and not go into it in the blind like we were kind of doing, because they were also preparing in case that would happen, and they would all be virtual as well. So it felt good to be able to help teachers, and then I had a lot of people reaching out then when they did go for that 2 weeks. So it gave me an opportunity to share a lot of things we did, the Google Slides we were doing, the choice boards, how we were doing things. So that was pretty nice that I could share. Here are those sweet kids, and I asked the parents, I said, does anybody want to send me a picture that I could share at the board meeting? I have an inbox full of the cutest pictures, and I'm still getting the pictures, so I'm trying to figure out what to do with all of them, but everybody was doing it. But flash forward to today, it is our 100th day of teaching virtually and the kids being here. So today was 100th day, and I can honestly say things are running really smoothly. I mean, I feel really good about my class. I invite anyone to come in anytime and see what's going on. The kids are awesome. They work really hard. We have really strong relationships with each other. In fact, when we've said goodbye to kids, I've had kids that need to turn off their camera because they're sad and they don't want us to see it. I've got emotional with, I have to, oh my gosh, we made it this far, and look how great you're doing, and now you're going to another teacher. Fortunately, some of them, like the little guy in the gray, he started at Indian Creek today because his mom started working there today. So I got to walk him into school this morning. We're going to have lunch this week. So I get to still have contact with the kids. But I feel like our relationships are really strong. I was at a doctor appointment in December, and the doctor says, do you even know the kids? And I said, oh yeah, I know my kids really well. So I've worked really hard to get to know the kids, and it's just been a really neat experience. So when I ask the kids if they want to go to a breakout room or a waiting room when they're waiting for their reading groups, almost always they say a breakout room. Sometimes I'll give them an activity to do together, and sometimes they just go in there and they socialize, and I pop in and out, and parents have my cell phone number so they can text me if anything's happening with 5-year-olds in a breakout room. That shouldn't be, but I haven't had any phone calls or any texts about that. But they go in breakout rooms and they are building those relationships with each other, which is so important for that social development, especially those kindergartners, because that's such a huge part of it. They're engaged, as you can see. These were, well, some of these were posed and some of them were not, but they're engaged and they're learning at high levels. I think having the opportunity to pilot Super Kids this year has been extremely beneficial. This program lends itself so well to online learning. The kids absolutely love it. I mean, I just put up the slide with Super Kids, and the kids are like, Super Kids time, and they love it. They relate to the characters, and we do lots of fun things with our Super Kids time. And what I like a lot about that too is it follows the science of reading that we all learned through our letters training last year. And so the kids are really learning how to really read and decode words, and it's been so fun to watch that. And I've seen growth from all of my kids on FAST. They all had nice big jumps in their FAST scores, so I was really excited to see that. I've been able to differentiate instruction. I have kids all over the board, as you would in a regular classroom, in a Zoom classroom. And I've worked really hard to differentiate instruction for those kids that need a little extra push and those kids that need a little extra boost. I try to make sure I meet their needs that way. And we have small group time 4 days a week. And then on Fridays, we do have whole class time. I feel that's important for kindergarten kids because anytime we have a 3-day break or a snow day or something, we do have a little transition time to get back into our routine. But so it's nice to have the 5 days a week whole group lessons, but I do have extra time on Fridays for our team collaboration and then I have pulled extra kids in. Some kids, like last Friday, I spent 30 minutes just helping a little guy get organized and get all his stuff together. So just whatever I can do to help the kids, day or night, I'm there to help the kids so that they are successful in this program. They're also doing really well in math. Bob talked a little bit about our goals. Our kindergarten goal is to increase student engagement through math games, which is perfect for kindergarten. Some of our math games we do together. Some of our math games we have on a choice board, so it's a family activity. And thanks to Bob, we've been able to get manipulatives in all our kids' hands. We've got them cards, we've got them counters, we've got them dice. So it's been really nice that they have all of those things at their fingertips because kindergarten kids really need those hands-on things to learn. I also have a volunteer who comes into my class 2 days a week, and she pulls kids out, and that volunteer happens to be my awesome sister. So I was able to get her all the materials she needs, and she loves kids as much as I do. So I got her the materials she needs, and whenever they see Miss Nancy come in, they all excited. But it's been really great to have her to give those kids even that extra, more boost that need it through that. So let's see. Okay, so I talked a little bit about getting those materials in kids' hands. We do a take-home bag every quarter. I had to do an extra one because I forgot to send home enough Super Kids books. I didn't predict how many we would get through. So I had we sent home a take-home bag every quarter. We were standing in the parking lot and passing them out to kids. Parents would stop, have their kids come out, get pictures with us and all kinds of things with our masks on. And then it got cold. So we just put the kids' names on them and set them outside the building, and they come and get them during the day. It worked out really well, too. So, and the kids families that don't have transportation or way to get those, we just make sure we drive those over and do a little porch drop-off for those kids so everybody gets it. In those bags, we have our hands-on materials for kindergarten activities. We have their games. Kindergarten kids need paper, pencil. They're learning to write. They've got to have some paper, pencil activities. So we are able to send home those kinds of things. The Super Kids workbooks I send home with my kids. And again, like math manipulatives and things like that. And I really think this helps extend their kindergarten experience beyond listening to a teacher, like you've done listening so nicely to me for so long. But we want to extend their experience beyond listening to their teacher talk on a Zoom meeting. So here's a picture and a few pictures, but just kind of showing that it does look like kindergarten. So Chip's sitting there with his bag at our friendship party. So on the 12th, when all the kids were having friendship parties in the classroom, we figured out a way to get Valentine's in the kids' hands. Unfortunately, the week that they were going to pick them up was the week that we were taking home things every night, and we weren't sure if we were going to be at school. So I spent that Saturday, Mr. Tomash, I told the kids, would drive us around and drop off all of them that people couldn't come up that Saturday, but that Saturday morning I sat at school in the snow passing those out, just in case that was really cold that week. But they all had their Valentines, and it was the sweetest thing ever, and it was so real kindergarten because as they were opening them and thanking each other, and it just showed how much they really care about each other, and that is such an important part of their day. We talk every day about our caring hearts, and so that was just kind of tied it all together. There's Lennon. He's creating a little Valentine craft. We had sent home in the bags. We had to be really prepared because you're sending home things for a few months, but he's doing that. And then down below, we were talking about community, our school communities right now in social studies. So we talked about our home communities, and now we're talking about our school communities, and we were really fortunate that Officer Dobbs decided to join us on Zoom. And it was so much fun. I don't think he had ever done it. And that first class that he came to with us, he was in whatever they parked the police cars, and he gave the kids a tour of a police car. So they're getting awesome experiences like that. And Friday, the fire chief came in for just 10 minutes, but the kids loved it, and they asked such good questions. And one of the kindergarten standards is ask a compelling question. So we talked about what a really good question was for the police or the fire chief, and they wrote them down. And one little girl on her own, because I asked her parents if they helped her write it, she wrote, "How can we support you?" And the fire chief, I thought, was going to fall out of her chair. I mean, it was just so cool to see the kids do that. I'd say that's a compelling question. Anyway, Our kindergarten team meets weekly, and it's really great to have that support from each other and help each other out and share things. It's been really a nice open communication with my team, so I'm very thankful for them, because I know everybody's working super hard virtually. This is just my little story here. Let's see, Sam and Bob are now meeting with us bi-weekly, and we're having our PLCs so we can talk about student learning and how we can support each other. We're kind of throwing around some other ideas for that, for our interventions and things like that. But I'm just so grateful, first of all, that Linn-Mar has ticks. I can't imagine this year without them. Carla and Sam have been instrumental in helping me learn so much. And if I can do this at year 32, anyone can learn how to do all these hard things. And I won't go through all the classes that they offered because I know Sam talked about them a lot, but those TQ classes after school have just been so beneficial to jump in there and learn that. And then if your teaching partner's not there, you can kind of share then your knowledge with them. So anyway, I am not sure what my future at Linn-Mar is. I don't know what I'm doing next year. I was going to be second grade, but numbers are, all over. I don't know. But this year has been such a reminder of what we always tell kids. We can do hard things. And we can do hard things, and we can overcome tough situations. And the kids can be very successful. I have a short video of a little girl, and this is what the kids do for me so I can have it up close. Even if we do a writing project together, I ask them to post it on Seesaw so I can see it, put it in a file, and then I have their writing. Because it's not like I can collect it and say, oh, Johnny needs to work on uppercase letters or lowercase letters. So Seesaw has been huge. And sometimes after a reading group, I will say to kids, I want you to read that again by yourself and then post it so I can hear you again. And some nights I go home and there's posted, maybe 110 Seesaw posts, but I try to look at them all very carefully and respond to the kids with what they're doing and give them feedback. And I think the feedback's what makes them keep posting it, because they really enjoy that. But this little girl, when she first started to sound and blend words, it was just like a couple months ago, and I'll never forget it because I'm like, you got it, you've got it, and I was so excited. I had tears in my eyes. Her mom was working at her desk behind, and she jumps up with her camera, and she's taking a picture of her as she's doing it, and then this was last week. So this is a Seesaw post. It's going to take us to Seesaw, I think, and this is that little girl, and this is the kind of stuff I get to see. Look at her.
Cat is set. Hot rod sits. The fast cat is off. Hot rod hits the gas.
So I won't have you watch the whole thing, but I just wanted you to see that because she, like all of the little virtual kindergarten students, have become readers or even better readers. So I know they're making great progress, and it's so fun to see it every day. So I'm proud that I work at Linn-Mar. I've always been very proud to work at Linn-Mar, where we can inspire learning, unlock potential, and empower achievement, even in a virtual setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
I know that maybe a year or 2 years ago, we talked about our one-to-one initiative and how students could learn virtually or through technology. I'll teleport myself back to that day, and if you would have told me we could educate kindergartners to this level completely in a virtual setting, I would have said there's no way possible. It's the tireless dedication of our staff that allows these great things to happen and these connections to be made between school and home, because more than ever, the virtual setting is one of those things. It is a school-home partnership more than any time I think ever in our history as a district or in our history as education. And I think it did one valuable thing. It really did kind of peel the door back off the teaching and learning process when parents are there, able to listen in and see the interaction between the teacher and child. I think it really shows the craft of teaching more than any other time, because you can come into a room and be in and out, But when you're there day after day, especially in the case of the kindergarten students, with that trusted adult next to them, you can really understand all the preparation and things that's needed to go in there. So thanks, Tammy, for sharing your story. That's really good stuff. So I did mention just a little bit about our spring assessment schedule. That's coming up as far as our future. One of the things that's weighing heavily on me is the transition planning, not only for fourth quarter, but thinking about the 2021-2022 school year also. And these are the things that weigh on me and thinking a little bit. I'm going to use some two examples really to make my point. As wonderful as our kindergarten teachers are, we're going to have some kindergartners that have never been in a school building before, coming into the physical room and interacting with peers, away from that trusted adult that has helped them over this academic year. So that's one example that weighs heavily on me, is how can we acclimate kindergartners into a setting. And I would even say that's for all our students that have been virtual this year. Another scenario that weighs in my mind is if I was a fifth grade student in the spring of 2020, and then we were quarantined, and this year I was virtual all year long because of the concerns that I may have on my health or my family, and next year I may be on site in a middle school at 7th grade. So those things we really have to think about and really think through how we want to address those transitions back to on-site learning. It's not something that we're going to sit down and think about May 25th and say, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And we're starting those conversations now on the best ways that we can think about. Number one, how can we have our family choice students come back to on-site? What supports can we give them? And also thinking about, well, once they're back in the classroom, we're going to treat it, we know these kids have been online and there's some things that we can do to acclimate them, but also is like diagnosing like we do every year. How can we diagnose their needs? Where are they at from now? We've done a really nice job, Sam and the other instructional coaches, as kids transition to on-site this year at different times. We provided a standards report card about these are the standards. This is the way that the students have scored on them. We connect the two teachers, the virtual teacher and the on-site teacher, so that they can collaborate. So we're not missing a beat with those transitions and helping to support students the best we can as they transition, either from on-site to online or online to on-site. So we've had some students go both ways with those things. I know right now, one of the things that our staff is really quite frustrated with is that we don't, if you're used to teaching in a physical environment and you have students that may need a little extra assistance or just some work completion things, you can always pull them up by your desk and have them work in those things. It's much more difficult in the virtual setting. You can set up a Zoom time, you can have them come in. Sometimes they come, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you think you've got them, sometimes you don't. But our staff is very relentless with that, and they reach out multiple times to try and get that work completion done, get that camera on, and get those assignments in and keep working. I know Nathan's going to talk a little bit more about our online option for 2021-22. It's going to be not the same as it is this year, but I would be remiss if I didn't, again, address the 31 staff that we started with and the amount of work that they've done and the amount of professional growth. I know I'll use Tammy's example. When they approached me about their professional learning goal, of course I thought it would be literacy, just because early elementary, and it's like mathematics, and it's like, yes, now you're talking my language. So I do appreciate them really stretching themselves in the virtual setting, engaging students. By no means did we start perfect, or are we at perfection right now, but day by day we're finding what's instructionally possible and really striving to get there.
Thank you so much, Tammy, everyone.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, we really appreciate all the information. Does anybody have a question that you'd like to ask? Sure.
Thank you for coming and presenting.
Absolutely.
And I know, Bob, you said that this is not your favorite thing to do, but I think you did a really good job with it. I just wanted to make a note, say that I heard what Tammy said about the teachers working 12 and 14-hour days in order to make this happen. And, I feel like we all, myself included, can, say the cliches about how much we appreciate teachers, but, at this point, for me at least, it's feeling a little, I don't know, I hope it's not lip service, you know what I mean? And sometimes you say it over and over again, and it starts to feel that way, and I just want to acknowledge that I heard that, and I know that's true, and I know that our teachers have invested their personal time, taken time from their lives, from their families, from their, their extracurricular activities to devote that to our district and our students, and that is a testament to the kind of people that we have here in the district, and it is such a gift to the students, it really is. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that I heard that. The other thing I just wanted to say is I'm so impressed at all this work that you've done, and all of the innovation, all of the out of the box thinking to make it happen. And I heard you say that we're going to be transitioning out of this model into 2021, 22, and I'm left with this question, which is like, what do we do with all of this stuff that you've done? Like, I hate to think that because we move away from the online model that we're losing all of this tremendous work that you've done. And I just wonder how we can take all of the things that you've done and created and learned and integrate that into the classroom, because it just would feel like a shame if you guys did all of this work those 12 and 14-hour days, and we didn't get to keep that, we didn't get to really use that going forward. So those are my thoughts. Thank you guys so much for being here.
And that's a perfect segue when we start thinking about a professional development model for next year. I know we've been planning that at Teaching and Learning, and one of the things that we've heard loud and clear from our teachers when we polled them about that is how can we take the best of this year and keep expanding on it in our classrooms next year, whether that's completely online or whether it's blended learning within the classroom. We don't want to lose the momentum that's there because there's been a lot of great work, and the credit goes to the staff and the teachers, not only in our online model, but throughout our whole district. You're just thinking that I'm a classroom teacher, I was hybrid, I was completely virtual, I was back to hybrid, and now I'm fully back up, back in the classroom on a regular basis. So the credit goes to our teachers. And again, I would be just our teacher leadership system, how they've supported us on this journey and how they've helped our teachers grow and students to grow so we can better engage students and really foster that teaching and learning process.
Thank you so much, Bob. We go on to Nathan? Did you want to?
Yep, I can do a quick transition here for us as well. I'll just echo what everybody else is kind of saying around the table. Thank you both for taking the time tonight to kind of share your story of how it's been, because it's been quite a journey the last how many months as well. So it's fun to reflect back on that and see the growth that's happened. So appreciate all that, not just you two are doing, but the entire group of online teachers. So as we look to next school year, Nathan's going to walk through kind of our thought process, where we're at right now. I will say everything you hear is subject to change because it's still very much a work in progress. But I think this is a good time to update the board on kind of what our thinking is right now, what our plans are, and then kind of what our next steps are as well. Because it's, as we've heard, we're learning a lot, and we'll continue to learn a lot this rest of the school year, so things may change for that rationale as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Weir.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to talk briefly about our online option. So obviously you've heard the success that we've had, and I think Bob and Tammy painted a great picture of that. By no means is it perfect, so we know we still have some things to work on. But it's also been good because we know what we don't want to do moving forward. We've really had probably our greatest challenge with the online stuff is that dual platform teaching. So you're hearing from the elementary teacher that was pulled out of her classroom. Her sole focus was on that virtual piece. It's been really hard for the middle school and high school staff that are teaching in both platforms. So we started thinking about next year, and obviously you've heard Shannon and the budget stuff that JT shared. Really, it's just we can't afford not to have an online option. And by that, if we let a kid walk out, our door and not provide them that service, then for us, that really truly becomes a funding issue. So, plus, we've learned from the successes we have, we should be able to create a fairly sustainable online school. So, that's what we've been working on. So I just want to briefly highlight what that'll look like. Shannon's exactly right. This isn't set in stone yet. There is an application that we have to get approved through the State Department of Ed. And I actually heard from them today, and I have a Zoom call with them on Wednesday afternoon because they have some questions on our application, which I assumed they would, because it's hard to put on a Google form everything that we're trying to do. So I just want to share with you a snapshot of the provider that we have been partnering with. So the contract would be through Edmentum. You actually see a contract in your board agenda tonight for some very basic, it's actually, let me see, which one was it? It's the Study Island for K-12. And the reason I show this picture is because I just want you to know that the provider, Edmentum, has multiple pathways for us to choose. So we set out this year wanting to have our own teachers really still be in control of online learning. And you heard that with Tammy, that was something we valued with our parents. We wanted our parents and families to still have that Linn-Mar connection. Study Island is what we're going to do to provide extra additional social studies and science. And that's just kind of curriculum that's ready to go. So you heard Bob say that they're working on pushing some of that out. The other options you'll see there is the courseware. That's K-5 and 6-12. So K-5, and I know that doesn't play nicely with how we have our intermediate grades lined up, because there is a difference between 5th and 6th. But the courseware is really designed to be an online curriculum. And the nice flexibility with that is that we can either use our teachers, or Edmentum also contracts with teachers across the state. They are a state-approved vendor. So all of this standards, curriculum, coursework, content, it's already been approved by the Iowa Department of Education. Then you see down at the bottom, and this is what some schools did this year that was different than our online, was the Ed Options Academy. That is a full-time teacher. So that is a teacher through Edmentum somewhere in the great state of the United, or the country of the United States, somewhere there's a teacher that would teach that. A lot of Iowa schools did that this year for their learning, and that was met with a little bit of hit and miss as far as where schools were at, because sometimes it was tough. They had some tech issues. Obviously, they've worked on a lot of that, but a good example of that would be maybe there's a teacher for a high school specific course that we don't have somebody certified for. That's going to be really hard at Linn-Mar because we have a lot of certifications. But smaller schools might use that to provide that course to their students. So there's a lot on here, but I show you that because again, the provider gives us that flexibility. So here's a little bit of what we're looking at. I'm just going to give you a snapshot of each level. So K-5, we would look back at that, well, the top orange bar, the third orange bar there, the courseware, and they would utilize Calvert Learning. Calvert Learning is a full elementary program, actually used extensively in homeschools, but purchased by Edmentum. That has all of the core coursework, including all electives, everything that a K-5, kindergarten through 5th grade student would need. Now, where the choice comes in with this is these could be directed by a Linn-Mar teacher, where we could supplement our own stuff that we've already created. That was a great point. All of our curated stuff, all the things we have in Schoology, we can also pull all that in. Or it could be an Edmentum staff member that we use for that. So it really just depends, where our numbers are at, and that's going to be our next step. I'll talk about how we're going to determine that. So we could use a Linn-Mar certified teacher with that. It does have a heavy parent just understanding of the nature of home learning and what Calvert Learning looks like. They actually do professional learning with parents as part of this, so that parents know this is what you're signing up for, this is what you would be expected to do. And again, as we get further down the road and start approving some of these pieces, I can certainly share with you what that would look like. Yeah.
So you had said our teacher, or depending on numbers, Edmentum teacher. Would that Edmentum teacher be just for our kids, or would they be put into a larger class of non-Linn-Mar kids too, or do we know that as of yet?
I don't know that for sure. I'm assuming it would be mostly our kids, depending on how many we had. Now, let's say it's such a small number that there's not that many, then they would probably combine those with another class so that they can maximize that. But I'm assuming in our size we'll probably have enough students. Good question. The 6th through 8th grade courses are a little bit different from the high school in that these would be back on our first page. These would be the other side of the courseware, the 6-12. So these are courses that have already been built online. So they do have some asynchronous parts to them. And again, these could be delivered by a Linn-Mar teacher or through an Edmentum staff member. The nice thing about 6-8 for us is we don't have to worry about licensure. So like right now, we have some students in Apex courses, which is a credit recovery program. Their counselor may oversee that schoolwork. So if they're in a math course, they don't necessarily need to be tied to a math teacher. Now, is that ideal? Absolutely. But in our system, they could go to a math teacher for help. At 6-8, we don't have to have that course tied to a certification because there's no transcript, you know, for the most part. We still want somebody that knows that course content to be there. So again, could be a Linn-Mar teacher, could not. And that totally depends on how many people we would have or how many students and families we would have sign up for those.
Ethan,
Yes.
I just want to clarify it. And, okay, so let's say I am a high school student and I want to be enrolled through this Edmentum and I want to take, you know, this high school biology class, let's say. Is that teacher then, is, you know, the teacher at the high school who's teaching the biology class to 30 kids, is it that teacher then that's going to work with me
Yeah.
through Edmentum? Or
Good question.
is it like one teacher is going to follow all of these different kids for different classes through this platform?
Most likely at middle school, we could utilize that model. 1 to 2 teachers, let's say there's 50 kids. They could help all those kids in different classes navigate that work.
Okay.
If it's high school, the biology example you gave, our plan with high school then would be to start identifying core courses that we could offer online. So for example, biology. I mean, we have 25 sections of that typically on an average year. We may offer 2 or 3 sections just online. So again, it's not going to be a mix of teaching in
Okay.
person and
Okay.
online, but if you're the biology teacher, you may have 3 in-period classes or
Okay.
2 in-period classes, and your third one is online biology.
Okay.
So our hope is that we would like to offer that in as many core courses as we can so that we maintain the integrity of the Linn-Mar diploma and what it means to graduate from our district, but that we would supplement that with other courses offered through Edmentum. Now, those can be electives, those can be asynchronous, that's more credit that kids would log in and they would do that stuff. So what we're waiting to see then is, let me come back to that. Our timeline then is, we should know by next week, once I get my questions answered, or they get the questions from us, if we're approved or not. They may have some things they need to clarify. Once we get that approval, then we would be looking at right away here next week or the week after, before spring break, to try to get how many families are interested. Just so that we know, hey, Linn-Mar's got a virtual option. This is what it's going to look like. Are you interested in that? This spring, we would finalize our agreement. We'd work on a handbook. I already have a document that I've started on as far as registration timelines, what the requirements are, who's eligible, that type of thing. And then the nice thing would be if we get all of this in place, we could probably pilot some courses over the summer through our high school, offer that for credit recovery, any students that are behind in credits, which would give us time to mess with the Edmentum platform a little bit so that we would know what we needed to have ready for fall.
Okay, I have one more question.
Yeah.
If at the high school level, if you're doing it that way, if I wanted to take most of my classes in person, but maybe I want to take this class, but the only one that's offered at the time is this online section, or maybe I just don't want to, I want to take that particular class online for whatever reason. Do those students have that option at the high school level, or would we get to that point potentially where
Yeah.
they would have the option?
We need to figure that out a little
Okay.
bit based on if we get approved, which I'm assuming we will. But typically what I would like to, and you heard Bob, you know, some of the challenges with transition and everything, this is going to be online. So if you're signing up to take online, you are signing up to take courses
Okay.
online. Now, we could talk extracurriculars, band and vocal. We can work some of those things out. But what I don't want to do is, I don't like my biology teacher. I'm going to take 3 classes on site and then
Okay.
take biology
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
That's where.
Yeah,
Right.
that's why I just wanted to,
Right.
wanted to clarify.
Now, we may still have that flexibility in our high school. Like I said, if we offer
Right.
25 sections and there's 3 biology, then they
Right.
could do those online.
There
But
may
our,
be some
but our
legitimate
online is going to
reasons.
be our standalone, you are a virtual student. And then that gets at some of the registration and eligibility, which I can talk about.
So like separately though, they were talking at the high school about offering some courses online.
Right.
So that would be
Okay.
separate from this.
Well,
This
I
is
think-
like
Would
if
you
I'm
use this
online only.
platform to do that?
We probably do both. So there may be some high school offerings. The other thing is, and that goes back to Rachel's comment about what we've learned, we already have online stuff developed. I mean, our high school staff has core courses that we could offer online. So by tweaking how we do this and partnering it with Edmentum, it doesn't take away our stuff we've already done. We haven't even worked with the high school staff on that yet because we're waiting to see if we get approved. And once we get approved, then I can answer those
Okay,
specific
couple
questions.
questions.
Britt?
So how does the Edmentum curriculum compare to the Linn-Mar curriculum and standards?
It's essentially the same. Now, sequencing and spacing may be different, but they are using the same common standards that Iowa developed state standards off of. So the only thing that would be a little bit different is Edmentum doesn't have like Iowa Core Standard 5.4 for 5th grade. It would have a national standard corresponding to that. But Iowa based their standards off of the national standards. And the DE has already said this is an approved program.
But in theory, every school in the state does Iowa standards that are based on national standards.
Correct.
But we pride ourselves on our interpretation of those standards and how we educate our students to those standards. So I'm just asking, like, is it the same level that we are used to for a Linn-Mar diploma, a Linn-Mar education at any grade level in this platform?
I know what you're saying. I haven't seen that yet, and I think that's why for some of the levels we would want to still have our own staff involved. And that's why we've talked, and Jeff and I have briefly talked about this, but that we feel like to maintain the integrity of Linn-Mar that you have to take core courses with a Linn-Mar teacher.
That's my next question is.
But I don't know how many, I don't know how many or what that looks like. The high school staff's going to need to weigh in on that.
So that leads into my next question about our teachers versus random online teachers, wherever
Yeah.
they are. Obviously, I would prefer it to be our teachers who are teaching our kids so that there's that consistent Linn-Mar feel to how the classes are developed on this platform. Speaking as a virtual parent, that was one of my first questions last fall was, how are we going to keep our virtual kids this year linked to their buildings and feel like they are still Linn-Mar students, not just Linn-Mar students who are now in this Edmentum program.
Right.
So one of the things that you said concerned me on the middle school slide. You said that you might have, because of certifications not being as specific as you need at the high school level, you might have one or two teachers just assigned to help them through the curriculum. To me, that doesn't sound like teaching them. It sounds like this is very much independent learning, which is also not something that I am in favor of.
Well, the problem becomes if you have, let's just say for simplifying this, if we had 12 kids at 6 through 8, I can't pull out a history teacher, a math teacher, a science teacher, right? But I think the other thing is Edmentum has a robust, like I wouldn't stand up here and recommend that if I didn't think Edmentum's product was quality. So it's a lot different than our Apex, which for some credit recovery is just kind of go and do the process on your own, that independent learning. This is going to be a lot more robust. They have an interactive platform. We use Schoology, so this will be a little bit different because we'd have to use their platform. Mm-hmm. But what I mean by that is we would have at least a Linn-Mar person that could help, hey, if you're having trouble, I can help and log in, or we can do a study session, or if I need you to talk to the math teacher, we can get you with the math teacher. But it's going to be way more robust than just sit and do it, and part of that is why they have that parent piece. So they require parents to sit and go through the training of it, because if you're choosing to do this virtually, there is a heavy lift by parents and students to have to do that work.
Okay, so I completely understand. I wasn't saying we need to pull 12 teachers for 12
right.
kids or whatever. The point I'm trying to get at, and maybe I said it wrong, is who's teaching the kid? Who are teaching the students the content? If we just have a couple Linn-Mar people that are, okay, if you're having trouble, I can help you log in or I can connect you. Who's actually teaching the content if we don't have a specific math teacher, social, if we don't have that, and we just have a Linn-Mar contact who's available to help.
Right. To answer that directly, the program is teaching that for the most part, in that kids are walking through the learning steps through Edmentum's platform. So it's created by teachers with Iowa standards, but you're right, it's not going to be, I'm logging in with 15 6th or 7th graders, and I'm going to provide you the direct instruction. It is going to be that tool or that platform that helps with that.
Okay, so
So it is
in this, yeah, so in this 6 to 8 platform, it is more independent then?
It's, okay.
Because because they don't have a virtual teacher.
But it could be
that's
independent
teaching
at the
their
high school too, it's just that we have to have a teacher of record oversee their course progress in there.
I think that is something.
Right, I guess I was a little confused to begin with too, because I thought that when you said that Edmentum would have teachers, that they would actually be kind of
Oh.
like logging on and
They-
going through these
Sorry,
classes.
they do if we choose the Ed Options Academy. So that's another thing, I think, based on our numbers. That is live, direct instruction with a certified teacher through Edmentum, which would meet
Oh, I
the
see.
Iowa standards for that. So going back to this, again, it's going to depend on the numbers, because our big challenge and the puzzle piece we'll have to fit is how do we staff this? Because if we have 500 kids in online, that's a very different staffing scenario than if we have 50. Because my biggest concern is that, the Tammy Tomashes of the world, we're going to need a lot of those teachers and kids to come back on site. And I don't even want to guess. I don't know what our numbers will be. If we have a lot, then they're not in the classroom. We can do what we did this year and pull them out. And, we've got time to plan. We can do an application process. Staff can select to do that instead of just randomly being told. But if it's only 50, you think of that across the elementaries, that's not pulling enough kids out to pull a
Yeah.
teacher out, right?
You have limited options, I
Right.
do agree with that.
But what you're saying, that K-12 Ed Options Academy, now again, there's a price with that. That's
Can say that
Yeah, yeah.
that's
funding
30,
that's different than
that's
what we're
like
talking about.
$3,500 per kid. But
Wow.
you're buying a teacher.
Right.
The courseware and mastery is at the $100 per kid because you're utilizing your own staff. So those are the specific details we're going to have to work through once we know how many.
And when we said this is a work in progress, this is what I was referencing
Yeah.
specifically is, it's a kind of chicken egg thing, because we need to get a program approved so we can then share that with families so they know at least loosely, roughly what they're signing up for, committing to, or interested in. But we can't really finalize that exact program until we know how many families we have interested as well. So that's the balancing act. So
And that's the
we'll be able to
ultimate
refine that
point
as we
I
go
was-
forward. And
That's
we'll,
the ultimate point I was getting to is, I will say that I agree with 98% of what was presented tonight with Bob and his team. How far they've come is amazing. The work that's happening is great. The communication, because of how it was being built as it was being taught, let's just say that if we had to do it all over again, there's lots of room for improvement there. So when you're communicating out to families about the option to stay online next year, that's a big decision. You could have a teacher or you could have a program guiding you and maybe ask someone for help. Those are two very different things when you're a parent trying to decide if online is right for their student.
Yeah.
Because if you know that they're going to have a teacher, that's a completely different scenario. Either way, yes, they're going to have to go through the parent training and parents are involved heavily, but there is a big difference for some families if there's a teacher on the other end live teaching versus going through a program.
Yeah.
you're 100% right. And the advantage we have this time around is we have a little bit of time on our
Yes.
hands. Not on our hands. We have time to work through that process. Where last year, you heard Tammy talk about mid-August, she found out she was
Oh, I
going
know.
a whole different career, essentially.
You remember.
I know, I live-
Exactly.
Yeah, we
totally
So this time we have some time to
I
work
have-
through that
I
process.
have lived-
We'll have to be really clear with people about,
Yeah.
here's what we know for sure, here's what's still to be figured out, and then come back to that communication.
And I know you're not going to have it all figured out. I'm just trying to say, please be as clear with the potential way this could look for families, because if they think it's one thing and they sign up and then we plan for all of these numbers, then it comes back and it's something completely different.
Yeah, great, absolutely. And so that's why we started looking through already developing a handbook. What are you applying for? What does it look like? Registration. Eligibility is another one. I mean, we need to have some rules in this that if you didn't show up and do online attendance this year, we're not going to approve you for online school next year. I mean, we're having some pretty significant, although it's minor, attendance and connecting with kids and families issues. So I think there's some administrative rules we can put into place with that. And then again, like you're applying for the year, maybe we can work around semester, but not this every quarter we're switching. And it is going to be pretty much a standalone school. And I would say all of us around the table agree that we think kids learn best when they're in the buildings, right? That's our ultimate goal. But we want to have a solution for families that aren't quite ready for that. And that can be a sustainable solution for us, because I could see us, online school is not going to go away. So whatever we come up with here could be something that Linn-Mar continues to offer to families in the years to come. Kara?
I do have a question about what we were talking about here, but before we kind of talk about that some more, I did want to say that that piece about the blue section at the bottom,
Yep.
that would allow us to offer maybe some courses at the high school that we're not currently offering, I really like that. I like the idea of this possibly giving us the opportunity to expand particular departments to students that maybe have a study area that is not super popular, or a foreign language that we don't offer. I think that that has a lot of possibility. Can you talk about Edmentum versus like Iowa Connections Academy, and kind of like what it looks like at other school districts that offer online? I think it's important for us to keep in mind that this is about like meeting these students where they are, and like kind of moving away from like it being because of COVID. And I think communicating to parents about that is important too.
Yeah.
That this, like, we're doing this to offer your student an option to learn the way that works best for them.
Yeah. Okay, so specifically Connections Academy is a school district that is using their own staff. I think they do supplement with some vendors. I'm not sure which one they use, but I think that a lot of their teachers are creating and doing some of that content.
I thought that Iowa Connections Academy was offered at different school districts.
Well, it's housed in one school district. It's
Okay.
open to everybody in the state, but their staff that's in that school
Is it
district.
live teaching?
It is some, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. The other, there's Apex, which we have used in Compass. That's very credit recovery based. So that's designed for kids that are at risk, that need a second shot at courseware. Apex is great. That's just, I would not advocate for using that as the main curriculum. Another one was Edgenuity, which sounds like Edmentum, but it is different. And I just talked to other administrators that had a really hard time with that this year. So one of the benefits of us waiting a year is that they've worked out the kinks. I talked to 2 administrators in 2 different districts that worked with Edmentum, and like had their CEO, their head tech person on a call with them saying, we need this fixed because this doesn't work with our families. And they had it fixed within a week. So their customer service was very responsive. So now, and that was down at the Ed Options Academy. They went the full route, like you're providing the teacher and the direct instruction. The other thing is it was set up very similar to how we did our cohorts. It's 2 to 3 hours a day at the primary level, 4 to 4.5 hours a day for the intermediate to older students. So, at least their times matched up similar to how we're running our cohorts this year.
I piggyback a little bit off of what Kara said, and I think it ties into what Britt said as well, which is, I would be really curious to look at these numbers, because it is a lot different if we're talking about 50 students versus 500 students. I would be concerned about, if we were going to have 500 students, I would be a little concerned, particularly if we're going with this model, this orange model, where it really is independent, learning. It really is, as far as I'm concerned. It might be like beefed up independent learning, but it really does seem independent learning to me, which is fine if we're talking about meeting people where they are, because that's what they need. But it is not necessarily fine if we're talking about kids who would otherwise be in the classroom but for COVID. So I think that's an important distinction, and I think we need to make sure we're very clear about that communication, so we really can have a good idea on the numbers. And I also think that there just has to be some acceptance on some level that you know, we can meet people where they are, and that's great. And it's not always we're not going to be able to do the exact same things for those kids that we can in the classroom, you know what I mean? So if parents and students decide that, you know, this orange model works for them for some very particular reasons, I don't necessarily feel sad, or that's not really the word I'm looking for. I'm okay that they don't necessarily have a Linn-Mar teacher right in front of them. You know what I mean? Because I just don't know that we can do that. But we can meet them where they are, and we can make sure that it's us that's providing that. They still have that contact with this district as opposed to them having to go elsewhere. So that's
Well,
it.
and then we won't lose kids
Right,
either.
right,
If we have to have an option, I don't want to approve open enrollments to
right.
Iowa City, Cedar Rapids College, Cedar Falls, CAM, I mean, all the places, they're all doing great things, but they're all going to have an online component. And I know school districts are going to see this as an opportunity to say, hey, look what we have, come shiny new online school, come learn with us. Well, we can create a system here.
I already
But I also
see
think
sponsored
it-
ads for public schools.
Yeah, right.
I'm already seeing it.
Iowa City's already one.
I mean, I see Iowa Connections Academy
Yep,
commercials constantly.
yep.
Yes.
I think it goes back to the numbers too. If the numbers are too low, maybe it doesn't make financial sense to do it. I mean,
Right.
so I guess you're right, we have to see. And I would, the other thing that popped in my head, and you kind of mentioned it, was extracurriculars, which could be a competitive advantage over, say, a Connections Academy is you can go to online school, and if, you know, however you want to do it, but you want to be on the football team, you know, that's a possibility if it works out. So,
Yep.
but however you,
So, I do want to clarify that I'm asking hard questions, but it's not that I'm against this at all.
No, that's great.
I've just lived this for the last 10 months, like on a very personal level, and so I want to make sure that the way that we move forward is the right way for Linn-Mar, and that we're meeting the needs of the parents and the students, and that we have the time and we take the time to put together an option that is they fully understand as much as they can when they're saying yes or no, and that it meets the standard that we have set as a district. I don't want this to come off as I'm against it, because I'm not. I just want to make sure that we're taking our time and making the right decision. And I would echo Tim's comment that if we don't have the numbers and it doesn't fiscally make sense, that's another concern. I'm glad you mentioned the contract in the agenda for later. I had a question about that because I was concerned that the first time we were hearing this was the same night you were asking us to approve it. But that's just for social studies
that's just
and
for
science
science
this
and
year,
The rest
right?
of this year, yep, that's not.
Bob and I just wanted to see what Edmentum stuff looked like, and it was like, I don't know, it wasn't even less than that. It was a very small amount to let us test out some stuff, and he needed a solution for science and social studies, so that's why that's.
That's perfect. That, I'm good.
No, the price tag will be a little bit more than $1,600 bucks, so.
Well, that was the other.
You'll notice that one when it's in
I was going to
there.
ask, is that I looked at the
I
contract
was
and I
all ready
went,
to solve the world's
Hey,
problems
if
with
that's it, that would be,
$1,600.
JT would love that.
I was going to ask that question too, because I was like, I looked at the contract and I didn't want to approve something the
Sure.
first time we heard it, but then I also looked at the price and I'm like, how good can it be?
Yeah.
If it's.
It's too good of a
Get
deal.
what you pay for.
Yeah,
a sense.
so.
It's
but I
budget.
just wanted to say, I do support the direction. I just want to make sure that we're taking the time and
Yeah.
really thinking through
Yep.
who's teaching and what we're teaching and how much of it stays Linn-Mar and how much of it is just like an outsourced product.
Yeah,
So,
Clark.
Yeah, just to go along with what some of the others were saying, what is the cost of this?
Well, it varies significantly depending on what option we choose. I mean, it can be as expensive as the bottom bar there where it says K-12, the Ed Options Academy. That's like $3,600 per student.
Who pays for that?
Well, that would be us.
That's us?
Yeah.
Out of our
Okay, that
allocation.
kind of goes along with what Tim was saying then too.
Now-
You know, it does come down to the fiscal responsibility as far as how many students would be involved in this, whether we go forward with some of these plans, because as we're getting ready to do different things like facilities and stuff like that, we don't have a clear picture on how many is going to be there. Do we need to hire more staff? You know, those types of things, I think it comes down sometimes with dollars and cents, and I'm like Britt, you know, old school, as many times as we can get a Linn-Mar teacher in there, I think kids identify with the Linn-Mar community, you know, and the fact that we've got our own people doing this, as presented with Bob and Tammy, when they were talking about the teachers are doing such a fantastic job online, and then we have to start, you know, maybe shelling out some serious coin, to have somebody else teaching our kids when we could have Linn-Mar teachers doing it.
I think it's important to note though too, like even if we would with that $3,500 option, that's still better than losing funding completely if a student open enrolls. Because we're still netting funding, even if we go with that $3,500.
But again, you're not.
We're providing the service for our
Right,
families that way.
correct.
And I think
And
that,
what's the
But for
cost?
500 kids, we're not gonna say,
Right,
let's do the
absolutely.
$3,600
Right,
per
absolutely.
kid option, right? You know,
What-
this would be more for a really, depending on numbers, if we can't find a teacher to do that, which I'm assuming in our system, we'll know what that is as soon as the numbers are. So my hope to be able to better answer your questions is when I know our survey numbers, I'm gonna be able to go to Edmentum and say, hey, we have 85 K through 5th graders. What do you recommend? Well, in that case, that's probably the courseware, which is like $111 per kid. That's a little bit more manageable, right, than $3,600 per kid. I'm no CFO, JT, but I like that math better.
You don't have to be a mathematician.
It's kind of common sense going on there.
Where's Bob when you need
So
him?
we'll bring that with our numbers, and that's like Shannon said, we've talked about this for the last couple months, Shannon and I, like, what do we do first? I gotta know, and I gotta have an application approved so I can tell, like you said, families, then we need to know, you know, what our numbers
and I
are.
totally get, I guess that's one thing
Yep.
we didn't talk about in depth. We've talked a lot about 6 through 12 and is there a teacher or not? Is the courseware for K-5, is there a teacher attached to that, or is that independently led platform videos too?
Both. So it depends. We could use our own teacher, or we could get a teacher, and obviously that depends on the price of which option you choose.
So, in theory, stars align, people sign up for this. When do we know, I mean, is it like it was this year, where we don't know until August and enrollment, how many kids we have in
No.
which platforms, so that we know how many teachers?
Don't we have to do that
My
a
thing
long
would
time
be
before?
to, by May, finalize.
No. I meant as a district. So like this year,
I think we need a commitment of the parents earlier.
I think that's
So-
what
That's what he's saying.
I guess my question, I didn't get there quite the right way. We know we want to do this by May, okay, and we've got people that are signed up for online, we kind of know what those numbers are. What I'm asking is, when do we know what our onsite looks like so that we know if we can pull teachers
Oh.
to facilitate online, or if we have to just do the self-led pilot thing?
Our goal would still be by May, but we also know every school year,
work in progress.
we have plans for staffing in May for every building, every grade level.
Okay.
And then we have to revisit again come August.
So we could
So
have
I
a
think it'd be the normal
preliminary,
tweaks we have to do.
we would have a preliminary idea you could share with us in April or May about what staffing might look like and if it would be one way or the other, and then it might change.
We have to get families to commit. You know, I can't go through July and be like, whatever the day that was in July where you and I looked at it, we're like, oh, there's 200 kids, and then 7
Yeah.
days later, there's 1,400 kids.
Yeah.
Like, we can't in July deal with that influx because that would severely change our options. So we're somehow going to communicate to families yet in the spring, this is what you're signing up for. This is our online, and we'll set a reasonable timeline so that families know what next year's going to look like, obviously, to make that. But if families want online, we will have a solution for that. But I can't get to the family in August that all of a sudden says, hey, I have 5 kids, I want to add to online
No,
stuff.
and that's kind of where I wanted
Yeah,
to kind
we
of
may
find
not
out
be able to do that.
timeline on knowing if we could use Linn-Mar teachers or if we needed them in physical classrooms.
As soon as I know a good sense of numbers, I'll know how many staff we'll need.
Awesome.
So
Okay.
when we-
One of the things that you mentioned before, I think, is pretty clear, is that in the communication process, which we've talked about a lot of times, the students and the parents need to know that, hey, you just can't jump back and forth like we were able to this year because of the coronavirus. You know, if you're gonna do this, this is a commitment, and because I just don't want any, somebody coming back at us saying that, hey, we didn't know that, or was confused because we were so used to what we did with COVID that we thought it was the same thing. So I just hope that we really focus on that kind of communication when it comes down to that.
We've been extremely flexible this year.
Right.
And we needed to be because of the situation. The situation's going to be different next year, hopefully. And so we're going to have to be much more stringent in how we proceed. But I think with a bigger picture, what we're looking at is really a changing system. The educational system is, we all knew after we survived this COVID world, it's going to look different. So you're starting to see the grain of school. Some of the things Nathan just, that menu of options you just saw up there is becoming to look a little bit like homeschool, a little bit like dual enrollment, a little bit like online school, and a little bit like in-person as well. There's going to be more of that grain of things, I think, instead of a very clear black or white. Now the state's still trying to figure out some rules for us to follow for that piece as well, and I think this will continue to evolve state-wise, nationally, and then for us as well over the course of the next several years. But we know we have to have an online component, not just at the high school, like we talked about for one of our 4 options, but really as a system to serve our families and also really meet our needs of our kids as well. We also know it can't be what we did this year, because what we did this year was out of dire necessity, and it's worked well. It's just not a sustainable model for the most part either. So we still have some kinks to work out, but I think this will be probably a year from now, we'll be talking about our online program and changes we want to make for the next year, because I think it'll continue to evolve based on parent interest and legal options that the state allows us or doesn't allow us to have as well. So it's exciting. It's also overwhelming to think through, because what you guys are asking tonight is questions we've struggled with the last several months trying to figure out as well. How does this all fit, and what options do we have, and what do we do if our numbers surprise us one way or the other? And we can't commit to something too soon. We also can't wait till August to decide. So I think we'll come back again in 6 weeks probably from now, April-ish time period, give you an update kind of where we're at, or maybe it's May as we get a better numbers for you as well, have a better, cleaner, more defined plan for you at that time. But I also know you're going to start hearing a lot of questions about this pretty soon, if you haven't already, so I want to make sure you got an idea of kind of where we're at in the thinking right now, knowing it's not set in stone yet at all. It's still pretty fluid. But
So I guess I don't know how everybody else feels, and maybe you don't agree with me, but your timeline says you want to finalize your agreement with Edmentum in April. I would prefer an update at the end of March, and then before we get to the point where we're approving an agreement, so that we can discuss, like we did tonight, what you've learned and how many people have showed interest. I guess I would just, this is a big shift, and I would like more discussion before we get to the point where the next discussion is the decision at the same time. That's my personal preference on a change this big.
and that's why there's not specific dates up there. Those are just generalities of time frames to look at as well.
Another thought that I had, depending on how many people, like 50 or the 500, this would not take away from, say, the state stepping in and saying you don't have enough in-person students to be, that you know, they're always trying to do something, and I just worry about where they're going through this process, and because you didn't follow these rules, then you're not gonna, if that passes.
The difference here is that the family is making the choice and we are not.
Did you have something before I?
Oh, it's okay.
I did just include
I'm
guidance.
kind of lost in this too.
No, that's all right. Clark, I did include guidance in there. It's a link in your handout where you can just see how the law has changed and the guidance for school district on this. I didn't want to go through this, but
No.
should they not
don't go
change? Should they not change the rules? They shouldn't, because we're playing within their rules. But we did that before too.
Those
So
rules can also be changed.
Yes.
I think just to be like the fifth person saying this, it's going to be so important when you survey the families to say, did online learning work best for your kid? Is this the type, like not, do you want to keep doing online? Because we're all still thinking about COVID. And you are asking them to think about the fall. And so I think it's like, that's going to be so important that the messaging with this is clear that is like homeschool. This is another option. This is another way for your kid to get educated. This is not like it was this year.
Well, and I guess make sure that when this survey comes out, it is very, very distant from when the fourth quarter survey comes out.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, let's do this one.
We're going to try to do one before break and one after break, so hopefully that.
Okay, 'cause yeah, that would be really confusing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
right now, the way the survey is, you only have to make a decision K-6 by a certain date, but how many
Yeah.
questions do you get from 7-12 that are like, oh, does this apply to me? I mean, it's already confusing.
Yeah.
We have complete confidence in Nathan and
Yeah.
Shannon that you're going to make the right decisions, because this is just another option, so we appreciate it. Thank you.
So, go ahead, Nathan.
Thank you.
Whatever else you have there.
No, you'll see more about this, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to the next. It's board visits. We had opportunity, all of us were able to make it to Bowman Woods Elementary, and most of us were at Excelsior. Would anyone like to make comments other than, every visit is unique in its own way and its place, and people are wonderful, and it's so exciting to see the kids engaged. So anybody wants to be more specific?
I just think that
I
it's
do.
really, I love seeing the creative solutions that the teachers
Yes, and they are
and
awesome.
staff have come up with. I really did see some different things that worked for different teachers, different grade levels. And I was just really impressed by that, and they keep plugging away, and,
So when
To see.
Rachel and Clark and I were in a group for the Bowman Woods visit, and we were talking with the teacher about the technology and how the kids are at that young age have adapted. And one of the comments that was made that has just stuck with me, and I think all three of us talked about it a lot after, was in addition to just learning how to do Zoom, elementary kids have to learn how to type this year, and there's never been consistent instruction with that. That's not something we offer. But now, all of a sudden, kids need to know how to type so they can do their homework, so they can participate in class. And the teacher mentioned that there are other districts in our area that their kids are proficient in typing by grade 2 or grade 3. And that maybe we should have a technology specials rotation at the elementary level that starts and we've had these conversations about technology and what should we do earlier, and I think this fits into that conversation. It fits into what we just talked about, where everything has changed and we're trying to figure out what do we keep and what do we bring forward. And I think that is something we should be talking about, is typing. Like, we should be teaching our elementary age children how to type.
And to print.
And we need to figure out what that looks like.
I'm sorry, you have to be able to do something other than use a typewriter too.
Like, even, like, you have kids like at the upper grade levels now that cannot type proficiently because we don't teach them.
Oh, I
So,
totally
like,
agree.
Right.
I mean,
It's kind of like when people are like, oh, we have to keep teaching cursive.
Yes,
Like, my kids
yes.
still learn cursive. We will still, we talked about, Tammy talked about sending home paper and pencils. Like, I don't think anybody is saying one over the other, but like being able
Both
to do it
need to
without
be
looking
addressed.
is so important. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you.
Both
This
need to
year's
be addressed.
amplified that, the need for keyboarding has never
Yes.
been stronger than it has
Yes.
this year. So
I
that's-
took a typing class in 9th grade. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget who sat behind me, who sat next to me, and you know what? I can type. I can still type. I can still type something like 60, 70, 80 words a minute, and I can, do it with few errors. It's an invaluable skill.
Well,
Everybody should learn how to type properly.
I remember,
Okay, let's move on if we can. Legislative updates?
Oh. I wanted to talk about. Before we do that, can I comment? I wanted to comment on that.
Okay.
The elementary and the
One more
Excelsior.
comment, go for it.
Well, sorry, I mean, if you don't
No,
want me.
no, that's fine, Clark. I'm
It's just
sorry.
that when we went into the Bowman Woods thing, the thing that noticed is the enthusiasm of not only the students, but the teachers. I mean, they were getting after it. I mean, they made posters for us and welcoming us. Every classroom that the three of us went into, and I'm sure everybody else, everybody was into learning and happy to see us. And, this might be very infinitesimal point, but a lot of the desks had things hooked on so they could put their backpacks on, which made it easily accessible to to water and pencils if they need them or whatever the case may be. I like the way that they've changed the format into the library. That opened up a lot of space, and we could see different desk configurations that I think worked out. Excelsior, we got to see some of the same things, but we got to really see a lot of the online and how they were managing that, as well as the staff. And I think it just goes to reinforce what we've said before, and we can say it over and over again. How thrilled the teachers were to have kids back in the classroom, how enthusiastic the staff was, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, legislative update.
I can
Shannon?
kick off the legislative update conversation. It continues to be a busy week, week after week at the Capitol. I don't think that's an exaggeration across the board, but especially in education. Bills that we've been kind of following, looks like SSA has been pretty much finalized between the House and the Senate, and is now waiting governor approval at 2.4%. So that's a big one, which is about the range we initially thought it would probably fall, so no surprise. Not adequate from our perspective, but also not really a surprise either. The one-time funding bill has gone back and forth in the House and the Senate. This is one we want to continue to keep close tabs on as well, partly because we appreciate the one-time funding to help schools get through these times, but also there's some equity things there that we feel like we would be shortchanged at if the House bill goes through, and the Senate bill has some different criteria too. So it's back at the Senate to be looked at as well. So essentially, we would be getting punished for the times we offered virtual learning or hybrid instead of fully in person. That just seems like a punishment that's unnecessary and borderline unethical to me as far as the decisions we have made as a district. So that's one we'll need to continue to monitor and advocate for us as well. The third bill I just mentioned, we need to continue to keep an eye on, is the voucher bill. It got through the Senate. As you know, it's been sitting at the House. Has not been any action there lately. That doesn't mean it won't surface again in different formats, or looks like it'll be broken up into smaller pieces, which may be more appealing to legislators, but still no real action on that recently. And the last thing I'll mention right away, and then open up to Tim and Britt especially to add, with our new liaison role, we've been pretty active, I guess, lately, monitoring things pretty carefully. We met with our local legislators Friday afternoon. They were willing to meet with us, which we were really appreciative of. So that was great. I met with Senator Mathis during the day. She couldn't make our afternoon meeting time, and then got to meet with Representatives Donahue and Jurdy Friday afternoon. I thought that was a really good conversation. We were able to share our thoughts and our priorities. They were able to give us some insights on things that they see happening behind the scenes a little bit, and then also really kind of put us in connection with a few people that, because we have very public education supportive reps in our area. They were able to put us in contact with some people that might be more on the fence that we can advocate to, because right now we're just preaching to the choir with our reps for the most part too. So good conversations there. If nothing else, just set a good tone for hopefully future conversations. And all three of them I have regular communication with all the time. So we're very fortunate to have the reps that we have as well. So we're appreciative of that. So Tim, Britt, anything you want to add from our conversations that we had?
The only thing I'll mention real quick is the other legislator that we probably need to reach out with is McClintock. He has a piece of Linn-Mar, more of the kind of the north piece. So we're going to reach out to him too and have that conversation.
I didn't hear the name.
McClintock.
Charlie
He's
McClintock.
Okay.
new this
He
year.
has,
Okay.
North
That's
of
good.
County
North of County Home Road.
So he's got a piece of Linn-Mar, so we should reach out to him and have that conversation.
Thank you.
So if anyone knows, I mean, we'll do that, but if anyone
Yeah.
else knows
Knows.
them, that's
Okay.
good. And
Thank you. All right. Cabinet update.
we got a few more.
Oh, I'm
That's
sorry.
That's
I
okay.
apologize.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Britt.
Okay, so we had a good discussion on Friday, like Shannon said, and we went through the different education bills that are kind of either sitting or they're moving or what we should keep an eye on. So there's a couple that we want to talk about, both in terms of, so we have a draft that Shannon's going to pass around of a letter that would address the supplemental funding bill. And when we say draft, I definitely mean like written this afternoon, open for input draft, but it definitely hits on the inequity of the funding that's being proposed in the House bill. And they're thinking it's going to move in the Senate sometime this week. So this is one that we would want to get board consensus on. This is the one-time supplemental funding that we would have to count every day that we were in hybrid as a half day, so we would only get half the amount of funding. And that would include, which this is the part I struggle with, is that PK through 6 has been face-to-face for all but, 3-4 weeks? But they would get only half funding credit as well, because our high school and our middle schools were in hybrid, even though it was a state-approved plan. Like, we did not break any rules, we went with waivers, so that's what this addresses. So that's one that we'd like to get feedback on, so that we can send that to the senators. And the process there would be, we're going to send it to every senator in the state. Ours are already on board. As Shannon said, we preach to the choir, but we can talk to anybody because every vote is towards education. So that's one that we want to try and work on this week. We're going to email out a draft we've been working on that addresses the vouchers in the charter bill, so that if the House picks that up, we'll have something ready. So we'll send the draft out for you guys to look at on that as well. So those are the two written pieces. The other thing that we talked about that we just want to get a sense of how the board feels. So there are 4 bills that are pretty discriminatory towards different groups of students that are sitting out there. There's the bathroom bill, the pronoun bill, the human growth and development bill, and the gender identity education components. Right now, they're sitting in committee. They're not moving, but at any moment they could. What we talked about on Friday was, instead of doing 4 different communications or stances or whatever on each bill, having a general discussion on, we are not in favor of any bill that discriminates or puts students in potential harm. That schools are supposed to be a safe place for students, and that these bills would do harm to students. One in particular that we thanked Eric for pointing out, the human growth and development bill would change it from parents being able to opt their kids out of that curriculum. Now they would have to opt them into it. That is the curriculum that covers good touch, bad touch, child abuse scenarios. If you're abusing your child and you don't have to opt them in to the curriculum that tells them that there's something wrong, that creates a huge concern for us being mandatory reporters of schools and being a safe place for students. So that's where I'm at with those 4 bills, and what I would like to see us do is put something together that is just anti-discrimination against students and pushing that schools are a safe place. But I also want to know how everyone else feels, because this isn't just me.
Yep.
Yes.
I want to make sure that when we communicate as a board, it has punch. And I think responding to bills that haven't come out of committee can hurt the effectiveness of our communications. I also have concerns about us taking a position on something. While I would absolutely personally take the same position that I'm sure you're recommending, as a district and as a board taking a position on something that is very divisive, that is not going to come out of committee. I have concerns about what that could do to our community.
Can I clarify?
Absolutely.
I would not recommend sending anything until a bill moves out of committee and hits the floor. If it doesn't look like it's not going to go anywhere, then we don't send anything. But I think with how fast things are moving, my thought was, if we knew where the board sat, then it would be easier to move forward. I don't want to write something if we don't feel we should ever send anything. So I don't want to send anything if it's just sitting there not making any movement and no one's talking about it. Then yes, let it die quietly in a corner, and we don't have to talk about it. But if that bill comes out and it hurts our students, I think we should be ready and know what our opinions are. That's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Does anyone else have a comment?
My biggest concern is that it entices.
So I did pass around one document. This is the draft of the one-time funding concern that we would have to address as well. we're not going to go through and wordsmith this right now, but please take some time and look at that over, see if you're comfortable. That one has come through the Senate in one format and the House in the other, and now it's back to the Senate for consideration, and that's on the schedule for this week as well. So
Drop
that one
dead
we know
time,
would like
you-
feedback
I'm sorry,
on.
drop dead time, you want this, a response, like the next day or two, is that your
The
thoughts?
next day,
Okay.
day and a half would be great. 'Cause
Yep.
it could hit the Senate floor by Thursday, and they would vote.
Can you email us this?
Yep, I can do
So
that.
we can comment it out in Word instead of,
Yeah, we'll have a Google Doc and kind of, that's the other thing that I didn't want to obviously email everybody all at once and break laws, so.
Good, thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. On to the cabinet update. Shannon?
Several things I'll run through pretty quickly. High school return to learn plan, last week was the first week back fully in person for high school students if they chose that option. Our numbers split, turned out pretty evenly split across the board. As you know, on site, we have about 37% of our students chose the 100% on site, 38% chose the hybrid, and 25% have stayed with the online. So by keeping all three of those options available, that puts us about 1,157 kids in the building at most on any given day. So by keeping those options, we've really kept a lot of our COVID safety measures in place for that too. So that's been a pretty smooth transition for the most part as well. So pleased by that. Current COVID numbers have been really strong in the county. The website's been down since Friday afternoon, so I couldn't get an update today, but it has improved a lot of recent weeks. And our staffing numbers have been extremely strong as well. Our students have shown the same thing. So we are at the lowest numbers of staffing and student positivities and quarantines that we have been in months, maybe since the start of the school year. So I say that, I don't want to jinx us, but I also never want to miss an
Here's some
opportunity to
wood.
celebrate being positive, especially this year too. So, so really pleased by that. That's been a big deal for us. And then vaccination updates. This continues to be a work in progress. It's gone well. We have our elementary staff and our transportation departments done as of last week. So that feels good to have those two checked off the list. This week we are scheduled to do our intermediate buildings and middle schools. Still working through some of the specifics. We have 3 of the buildings scheduled right now, the 4th one working through because it's a different provider. What we have learned through this process is every process of vaccination clinic is a whole new process. So what we learned the first time is absolutely useless for the next group, which just fits for this year. And that's not a bad thing. It's just we get a different provider assigned to us each time, and they each do things a little bit differently from where it's located to the schedules they offer to the sign-up process. So Carla and Lisa have been doing a great job. After the first time, we thought, oh, we got this now. We know how to do this. And then the next email came and it was totally different, and the next one totally different. But either way, we're making progress and optimistic about that too. So hopefully, the high school and district staff will be the next week. We do not have confirmation of that yet, but if things continue on the same rate they have been, that would be our target timeline for next week for the first round. So, and then we could do it all over again for the second. But either way, good to have that happening and taking place for us as well. So I think that's all I had for updates today.
Can I ask you a question that was kind of brought up about in-service up front? We did the 9 days. I know it's because of derecho, right? And is that something that, I think we normally do, what, 3 days? Or maybe something like that?
Before the start of the school year?
Yes.
Usually between 3 to 4 to 4 to 5 days.
And I didn't know if that's something we would look at doing, that people liked all the insert. I know it's necessary for some pieces, maybe do more. And I don't know if that's one of the lessons learned that you guys have talked about. And
Yeah, what we have.
That's fine, I'm just kind of asking the question.
Next year's calendar is kind of a combination of the two from our traditional number of days. I think we have 6 days, if I remember right, 5 days, 5 to 6 days to start next year. So we have a little bit more than we normally have, but not the full 9 because we still need some days throughout the year to spread out to do things as well. But yeah, we do have more scheduled next year up front than we normally would have.
Thank you.
I'm still thinking that the teachers are going to be in every day through June 16th, or are we thinking about less?
We are planning to talk about some calendar adjustments for the end of the year at the next board meeting. So yep, we have some ideas and thoughts. I kind of want to see. I kind of want to see how these next couple weeks go weather-wise, and then just look at things again as well.
Okay.
Nothing major, just some tweaks potentially.
Put a pin in it then and wait.
Yep.
So it just,
Okay, so we'll go on to the facilities discussion, and Shannon, if you would give us some background on that, please?
Yeah, I want to follow back up to a couple of conversations the board has had over the last couple of years, some information for you to share. I'm hoping tonight to come out here with some direction for our facility advisory committee to get coordinated and organized and get off the ground. The big decision for us is a recommitment to whether we need the second high school in the next 10 years for our planning or not. My recommendation is we do not in these next 10 years. The numbers that I have to support that, our current high school enrollment's just under 2,250 students. If we look back at our RSP projections from a year ago, from April 2020, they projected out to the year 2930 was the farthest they went out, so not quite 10 years, but close, and that put us at 2,579 students for the high school. So growth, but not to the level that the last time we had this conversation as a board, we did the 10-year capital improvement plan, and you had 2,800 students was the commitment at that time the board said before we look at a second high school to start planning. So looking at our current numbers, our updated projections from RSP, and then what the board had originally agreed upon for that number and space-wise that we have, I just don't see those numbers changing. So I think the key for us in this next round of facility advisory work is that big piece of the puzzle of a board decision more than that committee decision right away, and that group can then take off and do their work. Thoughts, questions you have for me on that
how do you
topic in
need the
general?
commitment? Do you need like formal commitment on the high school thing, or is it just discussion?
Not a vote.
More of a discussion, and because it's something the board has already decided, it's just more of a revisiting of that and see if you're still in agreement that that's where we want to be with the updated numbers.
I'm still in agreement. That's where I stand.
I'm still in agreement. I think, like before, you work on the extracurriculars always seems to be the issue, but as far as the number of kids, I like your recommendation.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't know what it's talking
All right, I think that we're good.
So our next steps then will be, we'll activate a facility advisory committee. We have 3 board reps already on there as part of the committee process for the board. And then we'll look at a nice sampling of people from buildings, from staff, but also community members and parents as well. I'm hoping to get that committee at least formed before spring break, and then start to look at the April time period for getting that committee together and start the work and working with OPN on our next steps in that planning as well. So exciting work, and it's exciting because honestly a year ago this time we were hoping to start digging into this, and then the whole world went sideways on us, so now we're looking forward to getting back into that work again now.
Okay. All right, so going forward, we need a motion for open enrollment.
I move to approve the open enrollment request as presented.
Thank you. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
All right, thank you. Any comments, questions?
Yes, I would like to thank Polly Wood and Jolie Goldsmith for, they're going to be retiring. And I've worked many years with Polly, and she'll be greatly missed by students and staff. And hopefully everything goes well in their retirement. I hope they
Absolutely.
enjoy it immensely.
I had a question about the junior achievement. I know in the past, for years, we've had junior achievement. How was that handled this last year with all of the, did we do anything with it? Did we get materials and teachers sent them home? I'm just curious. It's more than anything. Do we know?
I don't know if this is being handled consistently, so Nathan can correct me if I'm wrong. I know sometimes I've had kids that have been zooming in to classrooms for that part,
okay.
and the materials provided. Is that being done consistently across the board? I would have to double check on that to see.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
I'm not sure. I think that's been hit and miss.
Yeah.
Kind of
Because we're thinking about doing it going forward. And,
Next fall, yeah.
excuse me?
You said it was a casualty because of the COVID.
Oh,
And I
okay.
just said, hoping
But I
to
was,
gear up
yeah,
the fall.
I was
Oh,
just
yeah.
thinking going
Yeah.
forward, you
Yeah.
know, that hopefully that we'll be able to, if we're paying for that, that we'll actually be able to do that and that, so. Just, it was just a question. Anything else? Anybody? Okay, so we need to vote on the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it passes. All right, so, let's see here. Going forward, we have, excuse me, March 4th, looks like quite a few things. Finance, audit committee, board visit. We will be going to Compass, and that's 11:15 on the 4th. Looks like Barry, you have a virtual meeting that day with the Linn County Conference Board, and you had agreed to do, I believe, do the minutes for the Marion City Council. Is that
He's
still
gonna be
work for you?
busy on the
Yeah.
4th.
Okay.
No reason to work.
Yeah, we didn't include that this time. I looked through the minutes for the 18th last week and pertaining to Linn-Mar, so. All right, anything else that someone needs to comment about?
Oh, I was just gonna mention that, about Tate Monteborn, he won state wrestling, 160, and then we had Rice Park finish third, and then we had 2 or 3 fifth places. So we
Ended up 7th.
really good on
Overall.
the podium.
Yeah.
Lions.
And we did well in swimming too.
Yep.
Aiden
As
Karstensen,
well.
yes, he got a first place, backstroke, awesome. And there were
Our
others.
swimmers, yeah.
Others involved. Great teamwork for everyone. Is there anything else anybody needs to?
I just wanted to mention.
Yes.
So the superintendent for Cedar Rapids, Noreen Bush, received a National Female Superintendent Award.
Yep.
And I
That's
just wanted
huge.
to say congratulations to her because we work closely with all of our metro schools, and being able to work with someone at that level of achievement, that just makes us better too. So I just wanted to say congratulations to her and point that out.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Couldn't happen to a better person, and a more deserving person as well.
Especially all the things that she's been going through
Yes,
personally.
Thank you. Anything else?
Congratulations to her.
So, do I have motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Okay, Kara, second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you, everyone.